What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I want to talk about two fighters, Eddie Charles and Archie Moore. I want to slightly go through their career, but I basically want to compare their opponents and see how well they did in their career while they were in the game of boxing. Now, Eddie Charles did face Archie Moore. But let's quickly take a look at Archie Moore and Eddie Charles. Now, Eddie Charles' name was Mac. He was from Cincinnati, Ohio. They called him the Cincinnati Cobra, but he was originally from Lawrenceville, Georgia. He was born July 7th, 1921. He died May 28th, 1975 in Chicago, Illinois. Now, he was a 6-foot fighter. He was very tall. He had a 73-inch reach. He had a total box of 121, 95 wins, 52 KOs, 15 losses with 1 draw. Went to a high school called Woodward. And it was there when he kind of discovered boxing. He wound up becoming heavyweight champion September 27th of 1950 when he outpointed Joe Louis in 15 rounds. That fight took place in New York. But on July 18th, 1951, he was knocked out in the 7th round brutally with an outstanding left hook from Jersey Joe Walcott. Now, that fight took place in Pittsburgh, which is Eddie Charles' hometown. Eddie Charles had an outstanding amateur career. He started out as a featherweight, which is amazing. Because Ray Robinson started out as a featherweight as well, but he never went up to heavyweight, as Eddie Charles did. But Eddie Charles would win several world championships in the amateurs, including 2 Golden Gloves. He would win a welterweight, 1938. He would win a Diamond Gloves in the middleweight division, 1939. He would have a record of 42-0. He would win a Chicago Golden Gloves, win a National Golden Gloves. In 1940, Eddie Charles fought and lost his first fight. June 9th, 1941, in Cincinnati. He would really start to turn it on. He being there with world-class fighters, such as Teddy Uros, who was a middleweight champion, Anton Christofoli, who was light heavyweight champion, Charlie Norcus. He had a great fight series with Danny Nardico. Phenomenal series between Charlie Norcus and Danny Nardico. Eddie Charles would face Johnny Holman twice. Johnny Holman was a phenomenal fighter. Rocky Marciano twice. Charlie Burley. I have him ranked number 2 as the greatest murderous row fighter of all time. He had the colored champion 2 different times, welterweight and middleweight. He'd be in there with Booker Beckworth, very good heavyweight. As a matter of fact, I did a profile on him. Type in Booker Beckworth, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series, and you can learn more about him. He was in there with Jose Basora. Now, he was a fantastic Puerto Rican fighter. He was knocked out in the 3rd round by Sugar Ray Robinson. But don't forget, Eddie Charles was moving up in the rankings. Eddie Charles was one time a welterweight. He was in there with Joey Maxim 5 different occasions. Joey Maxim, who wound up becoming a light heavyweight champion. And he would stop Ray Robinson before the 14th round at the Polo Grounds. Ray Robinson obviously couldn't continue because potassium ran out of his body. But not only did he not continue, Ruby Goldstein couldn't continue. He was the referee. He had to be replaced by Ray Miller. But Joey Maxim was a very good light heavyweight. He would lose his light heavyweight championship strap to Archie Moore in 1952. And Archie Moore would then hold that title for 10 years. Eddie Charles would also be in there with Jimmy Bivens. Did a profile on him. Type in Jimmy Bivens, Scrapbook Boxing. He fought Jimmy Bivens twice. Tommy Hurricane Jackson. Hurricane Jackson was ranked number 1 at one time in 1956. He was in there with Gus Lesnevich, who was light heavyweight champion. Joe Louis, as I stated, 1950. He solidified his world championship title after pulling Joe Louis out of retirement. He was in there with Joe Walcott 3 separate occasions. He would take the NBA championship strap in an elimination match with Joe Walcott. He did that June 22nd, 1949. And September 27th, 1950, June 17th, 1954, He was in there with Rocky Marciano. September 17, 1954, he went right back in there with Rocky Marciano the same year. I mean, you can't ask much more from fighters. Jesse Charles was also in there with Kid Torno, very good fighter. He was in there with Lloyd Marshall and Archie Moore and Elmer Ray, Joe Baskey, Frank Buford. He had a tragic incident with Sam Baruti in 1948. Coley Wallace, I mean, he was in there with just about everybody. These are the names I can think of at the top of my head. But getting to Archie Moore. Archie Moore was born December 13th, 1916, Mississippi. He died December 9th, 1998. He died in San Diego, California. I had the pleasure of meeting him. He was 5'11", weighed 145 to 206 and a half pounds. He had a fighting record of 185 fights. I mean, he actually won 185. 22 losses, 11 with 130 knockouts. He had one no contest. He was managed by Jack Kearns. And that's phenomenal because Jack Kearns had managed Joey Maxim, the same fighter he beat for the title in 1952. But Jack Kearns was also a manager for Jack Dempsey, Mickey Walker. He was also managed by Jimmy Johnson. And Jimmy Johnson had ran Madison Square Garden for many years. He controlled Madison Square Garden. He was trained by Jack Burns, among many. But Archie Moore would face fighters such as Jack Chase, Black Murderers Row fighter. He fought him 6 different occasions. He was in there with Howard King 6 different occasions. Howard Johnson. Now, Howard Johnson was a phenomenal light heavyweight from Philadelphia. He was in there 5 times with him. Howard Johnson had a father by the name of Phil Johnson. I say this often. But Howard Johnson and Phil Johnson was knocked out by Jersey Joe Walcott, both in the 3rd round and both on top of the head in the temple. Carbon copy. Archie Moore was in there with Jimmy Bivens 5 separate occasions. Oakland Billy Smith 4 times. Eddie Charles 3 times. Joey Maxim 3 times. I mean, Eddie Booker 3 times. It's phenomenal. He had defeated fighters such as Jack Chase, King Johnson, Jimmy Bivens, Oakland Billy Smith, Joey Maxim, Clarence Henry, Jimmy Slad, Bob Baker, who was ranked number 2 in 1956, Nino Valdez, Carl Bobo Olsen. Carl Bobo Olsen was from Hawaii. He would win a middleweight championship strap in 1953 when he defeated Randy Turpin. He was part of that tournament. Ray Robinson had retired in 1952. He would defeat Holman Williams. Holman Williams, I have ranked number 1 as the greatest Black Murderers Row fighter. Holman Williams won a colored welterweight and middleweight championship strap. He was in there with Lloyd Marshall, Albert Lovett, Yolande Pompey, Eddie Cotton, Yvonne Durrell. He had one of the greatest fights with Yvonne Durrell that you could ever find. Yvonne Durrell was a fisherman from Canada. He was in there with Alabama Kid, Coco Kid, Lewis Hardwood. He was in there with Burt Littell, another Black Murderers Row middleweight. Jack Buddy Walker, George Cochran, Nate Bolden, Kenny LaSalle. Man, I can't think of anybody else. That's all I can think of at the top of my head. But I got to tell you, these fighters here was like the greatest fighters in the entire history of the game. I have Archie Moore ranked number 6 of all time. I have him behind Sam Langford, who's ranked number 1. Sam Langford was the greatest fighter in my mind of all times. He would win the Mexican heavyweight championship strap, European championship strap in the heavyweight division, the Australian heavyweight championship strap, the colored middleweight, the colored heavyweight championship strap. He was in there with everybody. I have Harry Greb, number 2. He defeated, in fact, he was the only fighter to defeat Gene Tunney. It was a light heavyweight championship strap. was somewhat of a military belt, but it was still a light heavyweight championship belt. Ray Robinson ranked number 3. Henry Armstrong ranked number 4. Muhammad Ali number 5. And Archie Moore ranked number 6. And in examining their careers, you can understand why. So I guess the next question would be, who did better? Well, if you look at it this way, Ezzard Charles became heavyweight champion of the world after starting his career at featherweight. Like I said, he defeated Joe Walcott in 1949 and Joe Louis in 1950. Joe Louis held the heavyweight championship strap from 1937 to 1949. 12 years, 25 title defenses. And had it not been for the war, he'd have had more fights. The knockouts that Joe Louis would possess, he had the greatest knockouts. The way he threw his punches, short 6-inch punches, greatest combination punch in the heavyweight division in the entire history of the game. Ezzard Charles would take the title. Now, yes, Joe Louis was over the hill. He was pulled out of retirement after his last fight with Joe Walcott in 1948. Yes. But he did face Ezzard Charles. Now, Ezzard Charles couldn't handle Marciano in 1947. I'm sorry, he fought Marciano June 17, 1954 and September 17, 1954, if my memory serves me correct. Now, he went the distance with Marciano the first fight, but he was stopped the second fight. But he cut up Marciano terribly in the first fight. As a matter of fact, that's when Marciano decided he didn't really want to take a fight like that anymore. He stepped aside after the Archie Moore fight. Ironically, these fighters are all connected. He fought Archie Moore in 1955. He stopped him in the 9th round, but in 1956 he hung up the gloves. He didn't want to take that kind of a punishment anymore. And it all started with Ezzard Charles. But Archie Moore couldn't defeat Rocky Marciano as well. So they both lost to Rocky Marciano. But Archie Moore would never become heavyweight because he couldn't get past Muhammad Ali, he couldn't get past Rocky Marciano, and he definitely wouldn't have got past Joe Louis. So you got to give Ezzard Charles that distinction. He was heavyweight champion. Archie Moore was a light heavyweight champion. Both men had problems coming up because of the segregation and the racial tensions. They never got their title shots. Couldn't fight fighters in world-class situations. But yet they fought and knocked out some of the greatest fighters of all times. Both in there with Holman Williams, Charlie Burley. I gotta tell you, two of the greatest fighters of all time was Ezzard Charles and Archie Moore. I remember when Archie Moore faced Eddie Booker in 1941. I believe it was February 21st. I can't remember if it was San Diego. I know it was in California, but it was a 10-round draw. And most observers felt that Archie Moore won that fight. He fought Jack Chase, Eddie Booker, all between 1941 and 1943. 1944, he was in there with Charlie Burley and Eddie Booker. 1945, he was in there with Lloyd Marshall. 2 different occasions, Jimmy Bivens, Coco Kidd, Holman Williams twice. 1946, he was in there with Curtis the Hatchet Shepard, Ezzard Charles, Buddy Walker. Now, Buddy Walker was some fighter. Very underrated was Buddy Walker. 47, he's in there with Jack Chase and Ezzard Charles and Curtis Shepard again and Burt Littell. Burt Littell was an outstanding black murderous row middleweight. 47, he was also in there with Jimmy Bivens. Bobby Zanander, another outstanding fighter. 1948, he was in there with Ezzy Charles, Charlie Doc Williams. I mean, if you know who Charlie Doc Williams is, unbelievable. Leonard Morrow, another outstanding fighter. He defeated Jimmy Bivens, did Leonard Morrow. Archie Moore was in there. I believe it was June 28th or 29th. Not sure, but he was in there with Jimmy Bivens. This is all in 1948. You see, what I'm telling you is this. You're looking at two of the greatest fighters of all times. So salute to these fighters. Archie Moore and Ezzy Charles, Cincinnati Cobra, Ancient Archie, and the Old Mongoose. Great contributions to the game. Some of the greatest fighters of all times. Archie Moore had that cross-arm defense, somewhat of a Philly shell. He was in there with George Foreman in the corner, showing him a lot of tricks. When Archie Moore used to train in Stillman's gym, the entire gym used to stop and watch Archie Moore. One of the only fighters that could do that. Lou Stillman was the owner of the gym. He used to carry a .45 on the side of his waistline. He was very controlling. But Archie Moore was the one fighter that he would allow to do certain things that other fighters wouldn't do because he was a fan of Archie Moore. And Archie Moore used to take two hands, bang the side of the bag. He would take both elbows and rock the bag back and forth until he was able to develop that cross-arm defense. And he'd be on that bag for 10 straight rounds. He was a phenomenal fighter, was Archie Moore. He'd be in movies such as Uncle Tom's Cabin and others. Unbelievable humanitarian, who I had the pleasure of meeting him, as well as fighter was Archie Moore. Ezzy Charles had an unfortunate incident in 1948 where he would knock out another fighter from Pittsburgh, Sam Baruti. And he admired Sam Baruti so much that when they fought in 48, and Sam Baruti got caught with a right hand in the 7th round, and he fell back on the edge of the ropes. And he was at the bottom strand, and he was counting himself out. He was suffering from nerve damage right there in the ring. And when they carried him out, they took him to Cook County Hospital. And Ezzy Charles and his manager stayed there all night on a hard bench because they wanted to know the results of Sam Baruti. That's the kind of humanitarian Ezzy Charles was. You can't fight a better fighter, humanitarian, and champion than Ezzy Charles. Donated so much money to charity. The Daniel Runyon Fund, along with Ray Robinson. He would buy little kids ice cream and pumpkin lakes, as did Joe Louis. So you're looking at quality fighters, quality champions. And I just wish we can do that again. They didn't duck anyone. They fought all comers. They worked their way up through the rankings. They knew their worth. And Ezzy Charles, when he used to get in there and spar, not only in Ohio, but in Stillman's gym as well, he didn't play with you. He tried to knock you out every single time he was in there with you. And he would spar with 10 guys at a time. We was on a heavy bag. He was on a heavy bag for several rounds. My dad told me several stories, along with a lot of old timers about Ezzy Charles. So salute Ezzy Charles and salute Archie Moore. I don't want to bore you, but I just wanted to take down a trip back to memory lane and enjoy some of these great fighters in the past. Thanks for hanging in there with me. This is Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Salute to Ezra Charles and salute to Archie Moore. Peace. Salute to Ezra Charles. Salute to Archie Moore, the old mongoose. Archie Moore and Rocky Marciano. Great fight in 1955. Archie Moore has Rocky Marciano on the deck in the first round, and he was knocked out in the ninth round himself. But what a fighter. The old mongoose. Archie Moore. Salute.